Hi girls, this is an introduction to the immune system. So with the immune system, the first thing we're going to talk about is innate immunity. Innate immunity is very non-specific. It has to do with anatomical barriers, physiological barriers. Anatomical barriers like skin is a really good barrier, so your skin is designed to not let things get in. So it keeps all the bacteria, viruses out. Mucous membranes are usually a place where viruses or bacteria could enter, like your nose, into your lungs, and your stomach. But your body has this thick layer of mucus to kind of stop everything from getting in. There's also a lot of hairs there as well, and these hairs are really great barriers to just physically prevent things from getting in. Physiological barriers, like the low pH in your stomach, it's really good to stop bacteria or viruses entering into your body. Producing a really high fever, that temperature is really great. There's lysozymes, which are just chemicals found in your tears and saliva and mucus that these chemicals can inactivate bacteria and viruses. And interferons are also really great because they can kind of slow a virus's replication. What's really great about these is that they're innate, they're not very specific. They mostly are just barriers to stop things from getting into your body. Okay, they can inactivate a variety of different bacteria, a variety of different viruses. They're not specific to anything in particular. Adaptive immunity is much more specific. So adaptive immunity deals with different types of white blood cells and antibodies. Okay, very specific. An antigen must bind to, it uses the antigens that are found on the surface of a protein. Okay, so let's look at a couple of different types of white blood cells. I think I did your notes slightly out of order, so you're going to go to the 4 major cell types of the immune system right now. So with phagocytes, they are cells that can ingest other cells through, remember, phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is another name for cell eating, so that's what it means. Cyte always means cell, phago means eating. So these cells will actually eat other cells. Phagocytes can be macrophages, neutrophils. There's a variety of different other macrophages, but they all pretty much do the same thing. They're able to engulf cells. You also have mast cells. Mast cells work really well with the inflammatory response. So if you ever get a cut and it gets kind of all red and swollen, this has to do mostly with mast cells releasing histamine. Histamine basically calls other immune cells and tries to recruit your immune system to come to the area of infection. You also have lymphocytes. Lymphocytes could be your natural killer cells. So those cells will kill invaders, but they'll also kill your cells, so they're not very specific. B cells and T cells, which we'll go into a little bit more, are very specific with how they react. Dendritic cells are also very important. They're what we call antigen-presenting cells. So antigen-presenting cells just means that whenever invaders are starting to get destroyed, it'll grab parts of the invaders, usually their antigens, and it'll present those to the B and the T cells to try to recruit the correct B and T cell. Okay, so let's look at how antibodies and antigens interact with each other. So antibodies are produced by B cells. B cells, there's millions of variations of B cells, and where they have the variation is in this very specific part of them. So on the end of the antibody, there's an antigen binding site. This is where it differs for every specific antigen. So you can see here that this antigen fits perfectly into this antigen binding site. A different B cell will have a different antibody with a different antigen binding site, and it may bind with one of these antigens. Okay, they're very, very specific, and when they bind together, it's going to target them for destruction. So an antigen is basically any surface protein or carbohydrate. So if this is a cell right here, a pathogen, Okay, any surface protein it has on the outside is kind of like its name tag. Okay, sorry about that. Study hall's coming in right now. So a pathogen will have these antigens on the surface, and they're just carbohydrates and proteins that they're like name tags. So this pathogen would be able to bind to an antibody that looks something like this. But every pathogen's a little bit different. So this one might have surface proteins and carbohydrates that look like this, and it will require an antibody that looked a little bit different. So they're very, very specific. An allergen is a substance that can cause an allergic reaction. So allergens are just like antigens. They could be proteins or carbohydrates that are in your body, and your body thinks that they're harmful. We know that they aren't harmful, but your immune system thinks they're harmful and reacts to them in such a way that it would be a pathogen. So someone who's allergic to peanuts is actually allergic to the proteins that are found in peanuts, and your body thinks that that protein is something foreign and attacks it, and you have this immune response to it. Okay, so let's look at acquired immunity. So acquired immunity just means that you've come in contact with and you've acquired the resistance to an infection. So maybe let's talk about this like the flu. So with acquired immunity, that means that you have resistance to the flu. This could either be active immunity or passive immunity. Passive immunity means that you get the antibodies from another source. So you didn't actually make the antibodies yourself. So with natural passive immunity, that means that you get them from your mother, from the placenta, from breast milk. You have that, or you would have gotten that from your mother. This usually only occurs in the first the first maybe like year of a baby's life if the mother's breastfeeding. Artificial passive immunity is when you're actually given injections of antibodies to combat an infection. With active immunity, this means that your own immune system is actually producing those antibodies in response to that antigen. With natural acquired immunity, you have actually come in contact with that antigen. So you've come in contact with the flu virus and you fought it off, and now you have that acquired resistance to that infection. With induced, that would mean that you got the flu vaccine. So you got the vaccine, and now you're immune because you fought off that killed or attenuated virus. Okay, even though it couldn't hurt you, your immune system still fought it off, and now you are actually, you've acquired that resistance. So let's look at how these cells mature in order to, in your body. So immune cells are produced in the bone marrow. B cells are produced, all of them start as immature lymphocytes in the bone marrow. B cells will mature fully in the bone marrow, so B for bone marrow. T cells will move from the bone marrow to your thymus before they mature. So T cell because they mature in the thymus. B cells are going to help with antibody-mediated immunity. T cells are going to be responsible for cell-mediated immunity. So let me go through what that means. So B cells with antibody-mediated immunity, this is also called humoral mediated immunity. They're the primary attack. They're used primarily to attack free-floating antigens. They contain antigen receptors. They create antibodies specific for an antigen, very specific. And then once the attack is over, there'll be memory B cells floating around. With T cells, this is cell-mediated immunity. This is used to deal with your own cells that have already been invaded, so cells that are compromised. The helper T cells are going to bind to the invaded cell. They're going to alert B cells and regulatory T cells and killer T cells. The killer T cells will destroy and get rid of all those compromised cells, and essentially the invaded cell will be destroyed. So let's look at a picture of how this all happens. So say an antigen enters your body. Okay, this antigen, okay, or pathogen, okay, has antigens on the surface. Okay, so here's the antigens. pathogen. Okay, this could be a virus, it could be a bacteria. It's going to have those surface protein carbohydrates. First, your nonspecific defenses are going to come into play. So your nonspecific defenses are going to be your phagocytes, okay, your natural killer cells. Natural killer cells will just destroy everything. Phagocytes, I'm going to show you how those work in just a second. And then you also have that histamine, complement proteins, things like that. So let me show you. Let me show you the phagocytes. Okay. So those are your phagocytes, the cell eaters, and then you also have these natural killer cells that'll just kill your cells, kill the antigens. They're not very specific, and they cause a lot of cell death. So they're very, very nonspecific. You also have the histamine that's produced, the interferons that are produced. That's also very nonspecific. A little bit more specific are the antigen-presenting cells. So you have those dendritic cells. Remember, that'll find the little cell pieces of the antigen, and they'll present it to these helper T cells. Helper T cells, these are the ones that HIV actually targets. Which is why HIV is so terrible for your immune system. These helper T cells will activate the antibody-mediated immunity and cell-mediated immunity. So with antibody-mediated immunity, okay, those cells are going to produce antibodies, okay? And these antibodies are going to float through your lymphatic system, through your bloodstream, and those antibodies are going to bind to the pathogen. So this is the pathogen right here, okay, with those antigens on its surface. These B cells are going to produce free-floating antibodies that'll bind to that antigen. Okay. With your T cells, they're a little bit different. So T cells So this is the pathogen with its antigens. The T cells are going to go around, and they're going to use their surface proteins to identify the antigen. Okay, and then once they do, T cell, when they find that pathogen, they are going to destroy it. Okay. If it's a bacteria, they'll just destroy the bacteria. If it's a virus that's actually inside of one of your cells, it'll also do that. So usually when a virus enters, remember, the virus is going to leave its little surface proteins on the outside. And so that T cell will come around and it'll identify that that virus entered and compromised your cell, and then it'll kill the whole cell. Even though it is your cell, it'll still kill it. So that is the immune system. Please bring your notes with you to class. Oh, one more thing. I actually forgot to go back and do this. So your lymphatic system is how all of these cells, these white blood cells, move around your body. So they can move from your bone to your spleen, which is a really important immune system, to your thymus. And they all congregate in these areas called lymph nodes. So if you ever feel like that swollen gland on your neck, that's usually your lymph nodes. That's where all the B cells and the T cells congregate, and they tend to get very swollen when you're fighting something off, because the B cells and T cells are rapidly dividing. I think that is everything on the immune system for now. Please bring your notes with you to class, and have a nice night.